Welcome to Absec Monthly, a DevCentral podcast featuring contributions from Aaron Brailsford.
You know, it is relatively easy to breach an organization because usually soft, fleshy things.
Malcolm Heath.
Just from a basic sort of security perspective, it's better to fix things earlier than later. It's better to structure your architecture and stuff that it's in such a way that it's secure rather than trying to bolt security on at the back end.
David Warburton.
What really fascinates me from a security point of view, now I like to kind of get geeky and nerd out about crypto stuff and all the latest technologies, but actually so much of security, like probably the most pivotal part of security is trust.
And more. I'm your host, Aubrey King from DevCentral, and we've got a great show for you this month, so strap on those earbuds and get ready for Absec Monthly.
Thank you for the intro there, Aubrey. So, back for another edition of Absec Monthly with Malcolm and Megazon. Thanks for joining me. Run through a few bits of notable news for the month first. From the last month, the first thing that stuck out to me was the CUPS vulnerabilities, the common Unix printing system, not
the critical end of the world with sky is falling vulnerabilities.
Exactly, right? It was as someone working on this end of the industry, the way this was disclosed was horrendously bad. Right? Teased on Twitter that the sky is falling, so everybody starts asking every vendor they know that supplies them with Unix systems if they're vulnerable to this thing that none of us had any information about. I don't know.
Yeah.
MZ, you wrote about this in Twiz, right?
Yeah, it seemed like it was overblown. You know, there was a lot of, at least at the lead in, a lot of teasing about, this is going to be a major new announcement. This is going to be a big deal and critical 9.0, 10 possibly kind of thing. And in the end, it didn't turn out to be all that much. Like, it certainly wasn't, some kind of end of the world Log4j type thing, which is what everybody seemed to be thinking it was going to be.
Yeah, I saw. I'm not exactly sympathetic with the teasing on Twitter, but I kind of sensed a level of frustration on the part of the researcher that somehow they felt that this was necessary to get any attention from vendors. I don't know what that person's experience was. I generally have found the Linux community to be pretty responsive. At least the kernel community to be pretty responsive when it comes to security issues or vulnerabilities. I'm not sure about the CUPS developers, but either way, that seemed like, not maybe the best way to build good relationships. I don't know. With the additional side effect of kind of making everyone freak out. It certainly was the hot topic in several chats I'm in. And interestingly enough, some people that I know, or maybe people that they knew, kind of somehow figured out it was CUPS before that was even disclosed. And from there, it was pretty easy, given the commit history, to figure out what was going on. Right. So I guess the reason why I'm bringing this up is because some of this is all about information and what you know and what you don't know and who's telling you what and what resources you have to find out more.
Right.
And for an awful lot of companies, I think they are very dependent on the vendors telling them, right? They are not independently investigating stuff. They are not necessarily doing, I guess, a form of cyber threat intelligence to keep track of what's being talked about on Twitter and, run these things down. Which seems reasonable if you're a giant company, that you maybe aren't going to be paying that much attention to every single little thing that I don't know. Certainly a smaller company would have a really hard time doing that.
Yeah, there's way too much out there. You can't expect someone to investigate, and you shouldn't have to, right? It's like I shouldn't have to investigate all the components of my call or to know if I need to have a recall done. It's the vendor's job to notify me that I need a recall.
Absolutely.
So you have too much going on as any kind of company you have networks, you have multiple vendors in your network expecting you to keep track of all the components and all those devices and what needs to be fixed and what's vulnerable is just not feasible. But the way this was done, it certainly wasn't following the best practices of responsible disclosure, or coordinated disclosure, I should say, instead of responsible disclosure, but coordinated disclosure of the way it was kind of trickled out and teased, it did cause FUD, for fear, uncertainty, and doubt across a number of different companies. We got it. I know other vendors got questions from customers like, are you vulnerable to this new Linux thing that's out there? And it's like, well, we don't know any more than you do, because all we know is what's being teased. And it creates a panic and a lot of churn, which is actually, I think, is detrimental to security, because it's a Chicken Little issue, right? Like, you create this kind of concern, people panic, they get all worked up about something that turns out to be nothing, really, not a big deal at all for most people. And it's like, oh, that was a false alarm, big deal. But you have too many of these like panic false alarm things, people start to like just shrug when they see new announcements come out. And then when it is a serious issue, people don't necessarily have the urgency that they should have in that case.
Mhm.
I do understand the researchers' frustrations, right? Like Malcolm was saying, that bore out how and why it was teased the way it was. And especially if you're a researcher who finds something that you think impacts a whole bunch of, say, distribution vendors, right? Like Red Hat, so on and so forth. Coordinating with all of those people, or even trying to get the attention of some of them, is probably quite the task.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. Now, I don't remember exactly the timeline, but I know on Twitter someone pointed out to this guy, well, have you considered using Vince?
Yeah.
The Carnegie Mellon's tool for notifying multiple vendors, right? Where Carnegie Mellon will help you do all of the coordination so that everybody agrees on a date to disclose and so on. That, for me, I'm like, well, duh, why wouldn't you use that?
Right,
But I guess
exactly,
if you aren't intimately familiar with that tool's existence, you're going to try and go about it your own way. And even if you do use that tool, I think we see this pressure a lot from the research community. They want to find something and want it to be fixed and disclosed essentially right away. And when you have 15 plus vendors, or potentially hundreds of vendors who might be interested in the timeline of a vulnerability being disclosed, that in itself can get hugely frustrating for researchers, I'm sure. Everybody's pushing for longer and longer, well, we can't get ready for this date, and then everybody has to agree. It's like trying to arrange a meal out for 15 friends when everybody's got different schedules.
This has been an issue with vulnerability disclosure since the very, very start, right? I mean, it's people have pushed for different timelines. People have started off with maybe like 120 days from disclosure to patch and release. But at every stage, people with differing agendas or differing needs are going to push back, or 30-day or 60-day or 90-day or whatever. I certainly, over the course of my career, have seen researchers be, in my opinion, very reasonable and say, you're going to have 90 days.
Yeah.
And I will extend this if you give me a good reason. And having the people that they're talking to continually put it off for sometimes over a year. Right. So of course people are going to get frustrated. I mean, this is my work. This is something that I feel is important. And and sometimes I suppose it's quite selfish. It's like, well, how am I going to deliver my talk at DEF CON if you guys don't actually disclose? But I mean, yeah.
In the end, the researcher has that they don't have to wait. So I mean, you do see. I mean, even large organizations, Google Project Zero, for example. We're telling you about this. You have 90 days. Clock has started. Have fun. And they have that one policy. If you might be able to get up to 120 from them with really good cause, but it's not just please. And I know working for a vendor, we're on the other side of that a lot. You have development and release cycles and everything. But part of me as a security professional really likes the idea of everybody saying, if more researchers said 90 days or 120 days, your maximum, vendors' attitudes would probably change over time of, okay, we have to jump and respond to this. And we can't just say, oh yeah, we'll get around to that the next time we do a release next quarter or something like that.
I agree. And I think that's exactly the reason why we all as an industry started having a discussion about these sort of disclosure timelines anyways. Because as I was saying, like in the early days, at least from what I remember, you'd tell vendors and they would just sit on it forever.
Yeah.
And then you'd be the bad guy because you were dropping O-Day if you got fed up, you know.
Right.
So it's good that, I mean, I think it has actually pushed the industry to take things seriously and to, you know, try their very best to get things within the disclosure window, and it's actually improved things to have that kind of pressure.
100%
On the
agree
other
with
hand,
that.
I mean, yeah, on the other hand, I think that getting back to the original topic, this kind of teasing on Twitter thing, however,
Yeah.
probably is not super great for the continuing development of good relations and better timelines between researchers and corporations, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't benefit. I mean, because in the end, what we want to see, at least I think most security professionals want to see, is an improvement overall in security posture for all users. You know, it's really for the end user, doing the right thing for the end users. You know, those, you know, like as a vendor, we say for the customer, but really, you know, for in the general view of things, it's the end users, the people just online in general. That kind of FUD doesn't help anybody. It gets people worked up. It wastes a lot of resources that could have been doing something else that was actually important, because you end up chasing your tail trying to figure out what's going on and what's coming down the pipe, and you have executives from the customer side, from the vendor side, everything kind of having a little bit of a freak out because they hear about this disaster coming down the pipeline. It gets a lot of people spun up, and then in the end, it's kind of like, okay, we spun a lot of resources up for something that didn't need those resources. You know, they could have been doing something else.
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
I think like deadlines are great for holding people's feet to the fire, and everybody needs that to some extent. But in this case, like it would have been better if this researcher had given the people he was talking to a hard deadline, and then if and when it wasn't met, 0-dayed it, because there wouldn't have been that fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And the people stuck in the middle, like us, for example, would have had answers. Yeah. It would have been a scramble to get the answers, but we would have had answers more quickly than there's, you know, there's something coming. And all of our customers, for example, desperately wanting answers that we didn't have. Moving on slightly in the interest of time, since you mentioned cars, MZ, and not recall related, but I'm going to segue to Kia, who suffered something of a cybersecurity mishap, might say, in the last month or so. I read about this, I think, this was Kyle's This Week in Security a couple of weeks ago, where researchers disclosed that essentially you could gain access to any telematics connected Kia with just the license plate, which should terrify all of us who own modern cars that have telematics.
Which is pretty much a modern car.
Anything in about the last decade, right? I mean,
a lot of cars do, yes.
Yeah. And cars are increasingly connected. Like the telematics in at least, the telematics in all of the cars I own only go in one direction. So, like, I'm safe, but anything a generation or two newer has full-time connected bi-directional telematics, whether it's, you know, the car is picking up real-time service information or phoning home to tell the dealer when it needs a service, or apparently in this case, allowing attackers to unlock the doors. I don't know. I don't know if either of you guys had any thoughts on this one particular.
Yeah, well, just to clarify, telematics in this case is like, this is sort of like the connected app or website sort of interface. I mean, that would be the way the customer would interface with it, right?
Yeah.
Remote start or unlock the doors or okay. Yeah. I would. Yeah. To me, this is yet another instance of cool feature. not perhaps well thought through. Because it is a cool feature. Like, I mean, putting questions of privacy aside, like, I totally understand why people think this stuff is neat and useful, and I'm sure the dealers find it very useful as well. But if you're going to do that, you need to spend at least a little bit of time thinking about how an attacker might look at it and what they could do with it if they were able to get past your authentication protocol or what have you. That, I think, was not done in this case, or at least I certainly hope it was not done, because if it was done, it was done very poorly.
Yeah, this is a case of the specific one was the dealer system where they could assign new owners. Like you sell a car to somebody and you give somebody access to your new vehicle, and their dealer portal wasn't secured properly. And so attackers figured out that, oh, I see a car, and then it's one of those things where there's multiple, the Swiss cheese model lined up. There's online services, at least in some countries, where you can go online and run a license plate and it will give you information about the vehicle. And so they just chain those together with a tool that would say, oh, I see that Kia, it's got this license plate on it, give me that car. And it would go through and give them access to that vehicle on the spot. And there's this, unfortunately it was, I guess White Hat doing this and saying, hey, I can do this. I can steal any Kia I want, or any of these connected Kias. Reported it, and it took them a while to get through to somebody who kind of recognized that this is a bad thing. And it's examples of vendors who probably don't think of themselves as being a networking company or needing cybersecurity, because we make cars, right? That's not computing gear. That's not networking gear. Well, it now is. It's a rolling network node. If you're going to connect these things, I just got a new Rivian last week, which on the EV, that it's more of a computer than it is a car. I traded in a Tesla for that, so I've been driving a similar car for several years. I can turn it on. I can open the windows. I can pop the doors. I can do all kinds of things from my phone. I somewhat hope that that's a secured system, because I don't want to have people doing that remotely.
Sounds like a good test project, MMC.
But that's the thing is modern vehicles. It's not just these a lot of EVs do this, but a lot of modern vehicles have the ability to remote start from your phone, or or crack the windows, or find my car type things. They have two-way. GM vehicles in the US for a long time, and probably worldwide, have had the OnStar system, right, where you could do the emergency calls, or you kind of had a service behind you. You could ask, where's the nearest something, before you had modern nav and connected navigation and things in cars. And even that, if you just have real up-to-time road maps and things in your car, you've got two-way data connectivity there. So a lot of cars have this kind of connectivity to some degree. And we've seen things that pass DEF CONs and other things where people have hacked different models of vehicles, even things people wouldn't think of as super high tech, like Jeeps and things, just because they had in-dash connectivity. That's what the thing it is. It's industries that are becoming networked, becoming part of the network infrastructure. These, like I said, are rolling compute nodes where they might not be thinking of themselves that way, and so they don't have all the cybersecurity infrastructure in place that like a networking company does.
Yeah, 100%.
As cars become ever more connected, and as cars become, like you say, rolling computers and networks of computers, right? They're all talking over not the most secure network. There was a quote from, might have been Jaguar Land Rover, about the physical security of, say, CAN bus and networks like that on the cars, where they were like, well, criminals will never figure that out because they're not smart enough. And then the next thing you see is like, the cars are being stolen. As soon as you get access to the OBD port, just reprogram it and drive away. I don't know. It's a short hop from this kind of stuff. Like, I can unlock the doors, or maybe remote start, handy for people in super cold climates.
Yeah.
Megazone. To controlling other systems on the car.
Right.
And we just drift ever closer to Fast and Furious 8. Furious, where there will be a swarm of remote-controlled, hacked cars driving through a city. And that will be the most realistic scene in any of the Fast and Furious films.
Yeah, the physics in those movies has gotten a little extreme.
Makes Grand Theft Auto look like real world. All right. I think we've beaten that one up enough. So just before we sort of start running out of time, the last thing that caught my eye in the last sort of month, who talked about this one? This was, I think, Lior. Was it Lior? Yeah, it was Lior in his This Week in Security, that a North Korean hacking group were reported to be exploiting a zero-day vulnerability in Internet Explorer to distribute remote access Trojan malware.
It lives.
Pop-up ads, exactly, right? And I read that, I'm like, did we kill Internet Explorer? Well, didn't Microsoft kill Internet Explorer? And yeah, they did. But like many things, they also didn't. Right? It still exists.
There's still DOS in there somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. This,
Mhm.
I see this all the time with our own products, right? It's so complex. There are so many components that are used for something that we can't get rid of because it's, a key part of the system. And apparently Explorer.exe is like that for Windows.
Yeah.
It's modern computing systems, so complex, so many dependencies. This house of cards. It continues to bite us. I'm not sure what we do about it.
Yeah, it's a problem when you have all these different teams, because people view something like that, or, whether it's F5, big IP TMOS, or it's Windows, it's monolithic, but it's obviously many different teams writing sections of the product. And, I'm sure at Microsoft, there were some teams that had built the dependency on that Explorer. And when the browser side, the user presentation side and all the stuff that used it for rendering Windows and things moved over to the Edge base, the Chromium base that Edge is on it now, this other team was just kind of like, well, we'll just keep using our little bubble over here and using this Explorer, but it remained accessible in some other ways that these attackers exploited.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. I don't know. This feels like a giant rant coming on, but I mean, you're absolutely right. What it comes down to is complexity. It's some very legitimate reasons for not wanting to rewrite code that's already been written, right? Of course, you gain all these dependencies. You don't want to have to write everything from scratch. You might be able to design a system where, and I think in some cases this at least used to be true with Linux, where you had a bunch of common libraries and people would use those, right? And so if those libraries revved or possibly went away, you didn't go away, but got revved. It was a simpler form of a dependency chain, but that's certainly maybe not always going to be the right way to do it for a whole bunch of other reasons, economic or what have you. I guess I'm just saying that this is a really, really complex issue.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's got any good answers. It seems to be the thing that's biting us the most recently. Whether it's NPM or whether it's log4j or any of these things, is we should be thinking harder about how we maybe try to fix this. But I don't have any answers, so I'm not gonna try to shame anybody else, right? So
yeah, it's one of the, I'm not throwing shade at Microsoft, certainly. I mean, because I glass houses, right? Because we know that BMOS has older libraries and things. It is a complexity. It's also a real world resourcing issue, right? In a perfect world, you have unlimited developer resources, and sure, that we need to get rid of the old library, or we'll write a new one from scratch, or we're gonna do it all. We'll move everything from C into Rust. We're gonna rewrite everything memory safe and do all these things. That would be perfect, but real world intervenes, and you have budgets, and you have resourcing, and you have hiring, and you can't necessarily do all of that. So you have to focus where your priorities are, and some of these times, these things, you might have a blind spot, right? Maybe you figure, I'm only using this library for this internal function, and it's not accessible. It's not rendering web pages anymore. I don't need to worry about that security model type thing anymore. That's not my threat model. But then someone clever finds a way to access that library and use it in a way that you're not currently using it, but now they can exploit those vulnerabilities. And that's the danger. But it's also like I said, the real world thing. Even on Linux, I've certainly seen you end up with 4 versions of the same library because something has a dependency on a specific version of Python.
100%.
And yeah, so it's even it's not a perfect solution because then you end up with this library cruft of 8 versions of the same damn thing because I need 2.3.1, I need 2.3.2, and they don't handle the revving. That's the way it should be. Like but in the real world, unfortunately, things get really messy really quickly.
That they do. If everything was dynamically linked and you could just rev every package independently and upgrade to fix a vulnerability, the world would be a much better place. But like you say, the real world is more complicated than that. All right, before we really do run out of time, there was a ton of other stuff that happened in the last month. Some interesting news from Google about their global signal exchange, kind of threat intel sharing thing to combat scams and fraud. I think it'll be interesting to see how that's going to play out. And it talks about they're talking about AI and all of that kind of stuff. But moving on a little bit from the news, Malcolm, what is Labs up to? What have you got coming up?
Well, the big thing is that we are going to be attending the APIWorld conference in Santa Clara on November 5th through 7th. We're really excited about going down there for that. And we will be presenting a workshop. This is a new version of one that we presented last time, I believe at RSA 2 years ago. It's actually kind of a game. It's a CTF, a capture the flag competition around API security. It's meant to be accessible for beginners. It's not a DEF CON level CTF by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a ton of fun. And we've gotten really, really good responses from running it before. And we just recently did a full rewrite of it. And it looks a lot better. And it's much more of a modern web app and much more realistic to what people would be seeing these days. So we're really excited to be presenting that. And if anybody happens to be going to APIWorld, please come and look us up. We'd love to talk with you.
That sounds really cool. Is that CTF going to be available just at APIWorld, or will it also be available online for those of us not fortunate enough to be traveling?
Well, we haven't generally just sort of left it up, but certainly we can run that for anybody who wants it. Or at least we've run it for a lot of different customer groups across F5 and even maybe run it internally. So we can definitely have a chat about that. Maybe it'd be fun to spin it up in such a way that everybody could do it across the internet. I'll definitely consider that. It could be fun.
That would be cool. I will keep an eye out for it if you do decide to make that more broadly available.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, on that note, Aubrey is back with us.
I did want to make a couple of notes here quick before we sign off for the month. First of all, Rivian, nice, man.
Thanks.
Did you get the 2 motor or the 4?
2 motor performance.
Oh, cool. I love it. All right. Anyways,
I got the R1S Max pack.
Very cool. It's something I was telling my mom actually about the Rivian this past weekend. So it was I love hearing about it. Anyways, what I really wanted to say was I just wanted to offer a thank you so much to Aaron Brailsford for being part of this effort, for starting this effort actually 2.5 years ago or so. I mean, really, we were just sitting there, and I figured I'm going to present something really quick here. I've got actually, this is our listing of the Absec Monthly episodes and the shorts that we've done. But I just wanted to go down to the beginning and note these first 3. Actually, the first 2 are really hilarious. So if Aaron, I really hope you have time to go through and listen to those first 2 before you head on to your next adventure. But man, it was fun. It was just the 2 of us stumbling around talking garbage for a couple months.
I'd like to think we've improved since then, but I guess the public will decide. It's been a ton of fun doing this month in security. I always enjoy chatting with everybody that we have on, especially Malcolm, MZ, yourself, Aubrey.
Me too. So with that, one more time, I just wanted to say thanks again, man. It's been a pleasure to work with you. and I wish you well and the best and things to come. I hope maybe we can have you as a guest. We'll see.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay.
Twist his
That'd be
arm.
awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. And that's really all I wanted to say. So I'm gonna jump out again before I guess you can sign us. You can sign us off still, man.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. With that, this is a relatively short episode, but we were all time constrained. So that's been cool. And good to hear what Labs is up to, Malcolm. I look forward to you telling us how the conference was afterwards, perhaps in a future Absec Monthly.
Absolutely. I know what I'm really looking forward to is, maybe about a year ago, there was a book that came out called Hacking APIs, which was a really fantastic read from, I think it was from No Starch Press. And the author of that, Corey Ball, is going to be in attendance at APIWorld. And I'm apparently going to get a chance to meet him. So I'm trying to figure out if I want to be a real fanboy and bringing a copy of the book down for him to sign, or if I just want to like say, hi, I'm Malcolm or whatever, but I'll get that figured out here in the next week or so.
Cool. No, that sounds awesome. And a good opportunity to meet Corey. So.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess in future, someone else will be introducing the news items. So perhaps it'll be MZ.
Might be. Sorry.
Well, we're going to miss you.
Yeah, definitely going to miss you, man.
Yeah, best of luck.
I will miss doing this as well. So, and you guys, obviously. On that note, thank you very much.
The original third 3 here.
I know, right?
And I will not see you next time.
Right.
Thanks for checking out Absec Monthly. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please let somebody know. Click that like button and hit subscribe to stay up to date on all the latest in the Absec world between now and the next episode of Absec Monthly.